Hi and welcome back. I know it's been a while, hasn't it? But here I am with a new tutorial for DaVinci Resolve. And in this episode, I'm going to show you how to use some of the tools in the Fairlight page to get nice and consistent audio levels without the need to add all of those faffy individual keyframes. I've also included a copy of the audio files in a link in the description, so you can go ahead and download them and try these techniques out for yourself on your own system. And just a heads up before we start, you might want to listen to this episode on your headphones. So to start, I've got a short edit here with some dialogue clips from an interview. Now, just by looking at the waveform, we can tell there's quite a bit of discrepancy between the high levels here and the lower levels here, and on this clip here. This sort of fluctuating level is actually quite common, especially during interviews that we're recording on location. People do speak unevenly, they can be quite loud at times, and other times the levels might drop, especially if they're unsure about what they're going to say next. Anyway, whilst we can accomplish lots with the audio in the edit page, it's going to be the Fairlight page that's the real hero here. And just by simply viewing my audio clips in the Fairlight page, I can see the waveforms so much clearer. I'll just solo this track so I can concentrate on the dialogue, and I'm also going to enable the stop and go to last position playback option by right-clicking the stop button. I'm also just going to add a track effect so that I can have a separate audio meter open. Sometimes I find the narrow meters in the interface a little difficult to read, whereas this thicker meter is a little clearer. Okay, let's have a listen to these first two clips and watch the meter.
My name is Chris Lang and I'm the founder of Warrior Mountain Outfitters. We are located in our store in Las Cruces, New Mexico. We want people to experience the Southwest because it's so unique. There's nothing like it that I have personally ever experienced, whether it's the community, the culture, the food, the landscapes.
Right, I'll just hit the dim button to lower the monitoring level and play those clips again.
My name is Chris Lang.
This clip peaks around -5 before settling down a little.
In Las Cruces, New Mexico. We want people to experience.
This clip from further into the interview is much lower, peaking around about -15.
Whether it's the community.
There's also some noticeable background noise too, but let's concentrate on one thing at a time. Now, sure, one way I could try and get a more consistent level is to normalize the clips. The thing with normalization though is that it works by setting the level of the clip based on the peak level. If the peak level is higher than the level you specify, the whole clip is lowered by -3 dB for this clip. And if the peak level is lower than that specified, the clip level is raised by around 6.5 dB for this clip. But generally the idea is that these clips play back at roughly the same level. From there, you can go in and fine-tune the levels in various ways, such as with keyframes. Ultimately, you're aiming for a consistent level for the dialogue clips.
My name is Chris Lang and I'm the founder of Warrior Mountain Outfitters. We are located in our store in Las Cruces, New Mexico.
So you may be wondering if there's a simpler, easier and quicker way to achieve the same sort of results. That is why you're watching, isn't it? Okay, let me reset the levels for these dialogue clips in the inspector so we're back to where we started. And instead, this time I'll go to the mixer, and in the track effects section, enable the dialogue leveler. Once enabled, I can open up the dialogue leveler controls by clicking the controls button. This track effect is available in both the free and studio versions of Resolve, so it's a good place to start. Okay, let's have a listen to the first two clips.
My name is Chris Lang and I'm the founder of Warrior Mountain Outfitters. We are located in our store in Las Cruces, New Mexico.
Now, it might not seem as though this is doing much at the moment. The blue waveform in the display represents the audio level from the track, and this white line represents the adjustment Resolve is making on the fly.
The food, the landscapes.
Let's adjust the settings to optimize moderate levels.
My name is Chris Lang, and I'm the founder of Warrior Mountain Outfitters. We are located in our store in Las Cruces, New Mexico.
Okay, this seems to do something.
We want people to experience the Southwest because it's so unique. There's nothing like it that I have personally ever experienced, whether it's the community, the culture, the food, the landscapes.
But let me play back this part again without the dialogue leveler.
My name is Chris Lang, and I'm the founder of Warrior Mountain Outfitters. We are located in our store in Las Cruces, New Mexico.
Okay, there's a peak of around about -5 dBFS. With the dialogue leveler.
My name is Chris Lang, and I'm the founder of Warrior Mountain Outfitters. We are located in our store in Las Cruces, New Mexico.
It's been brought down by about 4 or 5 dB. Let's have a listen to this second part of the interview without the dialogue leveler.
We want people to experience the Southwest because it's so unique.
And with the dialogue leveler?
We want people to experience the Southwest because it's so unique.
You can see that there's a rise of maybe 2 or 3 dB from where it was before. So you can see and hear what the dialogue leveler is doing. It's bringing the louder levels down, the lower levels up, reducing the dynamic range of the audio in this track and giving it a more consistent level. Once I've got that consistent level, I can then adjust it so that it's at the right level for the track, which is what the output gain control is for.
My name is Chris Lang, and I'm the founder of Warrior Mountain Outfitters. We are located in our store in Las Cruces, New Mexico. We want people to experience the Southwest because it's so unique. There's nothing like it that I have personally ever experienced, whether it's the community, the culture, the food, the landscapes.
Now that's pretty neat, isn't it? Now there's nothing stopping me going in and refining the levels further. It's just that I won't be needing to use as many keyframes as I was using before. That is, after all, the whole point of the dialogue leveler. You may notice though that despite the dialogue leveler having this reduce background noise option turned on, doesn't seem to be helping much with these clips. So let's turn it off. And instead, I'm going to apply one further track effect, although this effect is only available in the studio version of Resolve. In the mixer, I'll first need to add the voice isolation to the visible track effects. Then I can enable it.
My name is Chris Lang, and I'm the founder of Warrior Mountain Outfitters. We are located in our store in Las Cruces, New Mexico.
Immediately, this has the desired result, completely eliminating the background noise of the recording. I'll just back this off a little bit so that it's still effective, but I don't want it to be too aggressive.
My name is Chris Lang, and I'm the founder of Warrior Mountain Outfitters. We are located in our store in Las Cruces, New Mexico.
So there you are. A technique using 2 effects that can help you achieve a much more consistent level for your dialogue clips. Except those effects themselves don't give us a huge amount of control. They're simple, they're easy to apply, and that's the whole point. If you want more control, then you need to take a look at the dynamics on the track. But before we do that, don't forget, please, please, please like and subscribe, especially if you're enjoying this video. Okay, so let me turn off the dialogue leveler and the voice isolation for this dialogue track. And instead, I'm going to double click the dynamics box here in the mixer. So the dynamics for the track falls into 4 separate controls: the expander and gate, the compressor, and the limiter. Let's start by looking at the graph though. The X, or horizontal axis of the graph, represents the incoming signal level, and the Y, or vertical axis, represents the outgoing signal level. Basically, this is what we're listening to. They're also represented on this input and output meter respectively. The green line is the dynamics curve to show how I'll be affecting the levels. And as I play these clips,
my name is Chris Lang, and I'm the founder of Warrior Mountain Outfitters. We are located.
You'll see these green balls dancing around.
New Mexico.
They represent the different levels of the signal as a whole.
We want people to experience the Southwest because it's so unique. There's nothing like
right now, because nothing is being applied to the signal, the output is no different from the input signal level.
The landscapes.
Okay, so the expander will allow me to increase the dynamic range of the audio. It does this by lowering the softer parts of the signal relative to the louder parts. When I enable the expander, a couple of things change in the graph. Firstly, the curve changes to reflect what the expander is doing. And I also have this bluish line here. This represents the threshold, or the level up to which the expander is active. Remember, the expander will be working by lowering the parts of the signal below this level. Okay, as I play this, nothing much is happening at the moment, but you can clearly see parts of the signal are falling below the threshold level. And if I just scrub around here where the noise is most prevalent, you can clearly see that it falls under the -40 dB mark. So using this as a guide, I'll adjust the threshold to around -40. Next, I'll adjust the ratio. Let's start with 1 to 2.0. Now when we play back the clip, you can see that the background noise has been reduced along the curve.
My name is Chris Lang, and I'm the founder of Warrior Mountain Outfitters. We are located in our store in Las Cruces, New Mexico.
And if I scrub here again, you'll notice that the input signal is again below the -40, but the output signal is around about the -50, 55 mark. Right, but now we'll change to the gate, which will make things very clear. When the gate is active, the ratio control doesn't do anything. Instead, it's all about the threshold and the range. Again, the threshold is where the gate is being applied. Levels above the threshold are allowed through, levels below aren't, and are reduced by the amount of the range. And because our background noise level is below the threshold of -40 dB, it's reduced by -18 dB, all but removing it.
My name is Chris Lang, and I'm the founder of Warrior Mountain Outfitters. We are located in our store in Las Cruces, New Mexico.
Okay, let's turn our attention to the compressor, which works in the similar manner as the expander, but in the opposite part of the signal. The compressor has similar controls to the expander, most notably the threshold and ratio, but where the expander was working below the threshold, the compressor works for signals above its threshold. If I play our dialogue clips back again,
my name is Chris Lang, and I'm the founder of Warrior Mountain Outfitters. We are located in our store.
You'll see that when he's speaking, the signal is falling around the upper part of the graph, around -35 dB and above.
It's so unique. There's nothing like it that I have personally ever experienced, whether it's the community, the culture, the food, the landscapes.
Okay, let's enable the compressor. And we get another line indicating its threshold level. But notice how the graph flattens above this level. I'll bring down the threshold to around -35 dB, which is of course where the quieter parts of his voice seem to sit. And when I play this back, you can see that the outgoing signal is no longer as high as the incoming signal. That's because the ratio is only allowing for a 2-to-1 increase.
Experience the Southwest because it's so unique.
Essentially, for every 2 dB above the threshold, the compressor is only allowing a 1 dB increase. This squeezes the level from the top, reducing the dynamic range. As an extreme example, I'll increase the ratio to 10-to-1, which will mean for every 10 dB above the threshold, the compressor will only allow a 1 dB increase. You can see the effect that this will have on the signal by the shape of the curve. When I play back,
my name is Chris Lang, and I'm the founder of Warrior Mountain Outfitters. We are located in our store in Las Cruces, New Mexico.
You can see and hear that the signal has been pushed right down.
Southwest because is so unique. There's nothing
with
like
very
it
little
that I have
dynamic
personally
range
ever
between the
experienced,
loudest
whether it's the
and
community,
quietest parts of the
the
signal.
culture, the food, the landscapes.
Adjusting the knee rounds off the threshold level, so there's not a hard cutoff at the point where the compressor starts to kick in. Obviously, all of this compression means that my overall dialogue levels have been reduced, so I need to restore those levels back to where I want them. So I'll use the makeup slider to increase the overall levels of the compressed signal, just as the output gain control did for the dialogue leveler.
My name is Chris Lang, and I'm the founder of Warrior Mountain Outfitters. We are located in our store in Las Cruces, New Mexico. We want people to experience the Southwest because it's so unique.
Of course, this is an extreme example because I've applied so much compression. Normally you wouldn't apply this much because it just squeezes all the nuance out of his voice. So let me back the ratio off to a more sensible 3:1, and then I can bring the makeup level down accordingly for tightly controlled dialogue levels without the keyframes.
My name is Chris Lang, and I'm the founder of Warrior Mountain Outfitters. We are located in our store in Las Cruces, New Mexico. We want people to experience the Southwest because it's so unique. There's nothing like it that I have personally ever experienced, whether it's the community, the culture, the food, the landscapes.